Here's a shocking story for you folks. So, a 23-year-old bank employee was recently arrested and charged for viewing Mark Carney's accounts, the Prime Minister's accounts, ladies and gentlemen. This is what's coming out of the CP24 stating this. That an RBC employee, the Royal Bank of Canada employee, charged for assessing Prime Minister Carney's personal data. Not so nice when it happens to you, right? Considering the fact that Mark Carney and much of the Parliament administration, much of the Liberal Party is jumping on board to, central digitalized currency, that we're going to have digitized ID, that all your personal data is going to be filtered into this one giant database that's going to collect all this sensitive information. But they want to go after a bank employee that looked at Mark Carney's personal data. I guess that saying goes, rules for thee, but not for me scenario. So it goes on to state the RCMP have charged a 23-year-old RBC employee for assessing the personal data of Prime Minister Mark Carney, CTV News has confirmed. Ibrahim El Hakim of Ottawa was arrested in July and has been charged with fraud, over $5,000, unauthorized use of a computer, identity theft, and trafficking in identifying information. According to the investigation, Mr. El Hakim allegedly used the RBC's IT services for criminal purposes, including consulting several bank profiles without authorization and participating in fraud. RCMP spokesperson Enrique Gasset wrote in an email to CTV News. He was released on a promise to appear with conditions, Gasset also said. RCMP spokesperson Cheryl Bren wrote in a statement to CTV News that after the bank immediately identified unauthorized system access, it took immediate action to engage authorities. The individual named is no longer employed at the bank, she wrote. We worked closely with law enforcement to support their investigation. The investigation has been assigned to the Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, according to Gasset, who added the RCMP does not believe that there was a threat to public safety or to Carney's personal safety. However, as soon as criminal offense target the Canadian Prime Minister, it is the responsibility of our inset teams to carry out the investigation, Gasset wrote. Gasset said El Hakim was not previously known to police. When asked whether he is believed to be part of a criminal organization, Gasset said to the RCMP could not provide further details and is part of an ongoing investigation. El Hakim has a court appearance on August 5th and is expected to appear again on October the 1st. So, it's kind of very, very illuminating. Again, rules for thee, but not for me. Because our personal data, is being subjugated to the Canadian government, to these private companies that are working and established with the Canadian government to promote digital ID, to promote this convenience of having all your personal data on an application. That was what the Arrive Cam was about. We know how much of a scandal that was. Now that Mark Carney has become a subject into a similar instance where they're using personal data without authorization, do you think Mark Carney is going to turn away and realize that, well, if it happens to me, it's going to happen to everybody? So maybe having this digital ID, maybe having this mass surveillance system is not a great idea. Do you think he's going to have that conclusion? I doubt it. But here, from 6Buzz TV, 23-year-old RCMP, why did I say RCMP? RBC employee, Il Hakim from Ottawa, has been charged after allegedly looking at Prime Minister Mark Carney's personal bank accounts. He also looked at the bank account of Justin Trudeau. The thing I find the most frustrating is I'm surprised he didn't release the data. Like, if you're already unauthorized to look at these bank accounts and you're already viewing it, you might as well just, do the Robin Hood Act and reveal this information to the public. Because I think a lot of people like to know what's exactly in this guy's bank account. That Mark Carney, who has many conflicts of interest going into being selected as prime minister that still has not been resolved, still has not been fully investigated. We would like to know this information. And considering the fact that they're taking our information for granted and deciding against us, locking up bank accounts, deciding whether or not you're allowed to fly, whether you're allowed to have a driver's license, or so on and so forth. They're taking our personal data for their advantage. If he's already breaking the law and viewing this data without authorization, you would think he would go the extra step to release this information and Canadians be aware of this, but I don't know. Maybe this 23-year-old wanted to try to play safe, because if that information did get revealed to the general public, there would probably be further sentences and far worse penalties to reveal, personal data of the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and Justin Trudeau. But at the same time, we also had this going on that has not been fully investigated, that it kind of fell short, that Carney is to rescue himself from dealing with over 100 companies in sprawling government conflict screen. So he is in violation, multiple violations of conflicts of interest with Brookfield, with using businesses to acquire government contracts. And he being prime minister, that's even more troublesome, because he will then use the authority to pass on contracts to Brookfield without authorization, without the notice of other parliamentarians, without taking it to, the House of Commons for a vote. And Mark Carney, who knows he's got caught in this, said, I'm going to investigate myself. He's going to take the time to do a personal investigation on his conflicts of interest. And it was even reported, this is from Democracy Watch, where they know that Mark Carney announced he's going to do a self-investigation, is going to cover up this. It says Prime Minister Carney's ethics screen and blind trust are loophole-filled, unethical smokescreens. So they were supposed to investigate the 100 companies, the 100 companies that are involved with government contracts under the authority of Mark Carney, and the blind trust, all the assets, all the investments that he made over the years. They said he put into a blind trust so that him being a prime minister can't actually have access to this. But we know that he's still continuing to get large amounts of investment to that blind trust, and saying that he's going to self-investigate or have personal people that he knows investigate this conflict. We know that there's going to be loopholes. We know that's unethical to have an internal investigation on a crime that you committed. It makes absolutely no sense. It's just like when Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or any of the war manufacturers tried to self-investigate whether or not a bomb was used to detonate a village in Latin America or the Middle East. We're going to take a personal investigation to whether or not we manufacture the bombs. It's proven that right there on the side, it says Lockheed Martin. So it's just so crazy. It's so crazy. And the fact that an RBC employee, I don't know why I keep saying RCMP, RBC employee, the Royal Bank of Canada, had this kind of opportunity. It's kind of astonishing that I thought maybe it could have went further. But we do have some details on this information. So Moose from the Loose put this together. He said, I found what clearly looks like another conflict of interest in Carney's stock investment that isn't screened. Spoiler, it's his green grift he's been running with Bill Gates going back years at this point. So Moose on the Loose, who also does great work, I highly recommend checking out his YouTube channel. He dove in to the assets that Mark Carney played a part of when he was working still with Brookfield. And he was also part of the UN. He was also part of the WEF. and he played a major factor into government contracts awarded to private equity firms like Brookfield, like other properties that Brookfield bought, and how Mark Carney was able to establish this huge investment portfolio, enacting in roles of government and legislating while making these huge slums of investments because he awarded the contracts specifically to the companies that Mark Carney was dealing with. So take a look at this. It's fairly lengthy, but I sped it up, and let's just see a bit of this.
We're all looking for the same objective. We're all trying to get to net zero and to make the kind of innovations that Bill Gates was talking about a moment ago.
Carney's got more conflicts of interest than he disclosed. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. I've been digging around his list of 567 managed stocks, and there's one in there I found so far that is most definitely a conflict of interest. Let's jump into this. Starting here at Mark Carney's stocks. So he has 103 that are on this list here of conflicts of interest that he's put a screen on. I should note too, it seems all of these are Brookfield companies. I haven't verified that yet, but it does seem most of these, if not all of these, are small companies Brookfield owns. So even though he says here he has no direct financial interest in them, he owns options and deferred share units in Brookfield Corporation and options and deferred units in Brookfield Asset Management. Thus, he'll make more money if the value of these go up. He's already put screens on those, his two buddies who I don't think are going to be screening anything. But if we take a look at all these other ones here, the 567 stocks, most of them headquartered in America, we've got one down here, Occidental Petroleum Corporation. So this is an oil gas company and a carbon capture company. This most definitely should be on his list of screened companies. Now, underneath all of his stocks here, I'm starting a new section, depending on how many of these we find. Here we'll see the series of events. Mark Carney's appointed UN envoy, special envoy for climate action in December of 2019. Just a year later, the TSVCM is created. That's, as you can see here, Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Markets. Mark Carney and Bill Winters launched GFANZ. This is the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero in November of 2021. Moving into the middle of 2023, then you've got Occidental moves towards carbon capture purchasing of carbon engineering. That's the basic timeline.
Participating in the type of offset market that this report recommends, it's not just a commitment. It's a commitment which has a net zero plan, which is rooted in science-based targets.
So who exactly is Occidental Petroleum? They're an oil and gas company that decided to get into carbon capture. As it says here in August 2023, they acquired Carbon Engineering Limited, a Canadian DAC, direct air capture firm, for approximately $1.1 billion, which we see here from this press release. Occidental enters into agreement. There it is, $1.1 billion. And you see there August 15th. Here's the actual facility. This is located in Squamish, BC. This is a Canadian company. So Occidental is an American company, a big oil company, but they're buying carbon capture companies like Carbon Engineering, this company here in Squamish.
So this is what I mean. This is why Mark Carney is a criminal. We have a criminal running the country. Because all these conflicts of interest, the fact that Mark Carney got Brookfield to purchase these companies like this oil and gas and carbon capture company, buy it up as an asset, and then using his power and authority as the UN envoy for climate change is now pushing that towards Canada, which was then under Justin Trudeau, pushing the pressure to put legislation that would have awarded the company that Brookfield bought to use in Canada. This is criminalizing. So the fact that a 23-year-old was not having the authority to look into the data of the prime minister, yeah, you could say that, he didn't have the authority, so technically he should be punished for that. But it's not as criminalizing as this, as the fact that the prime minister, before he got selected to run this country, was deliberately intact to push legislation in favor of his assets, in favor of his investments, in favor of specifically Brookfield-owned properties. That's why there was an investigation. That's why Mark Carney was called out for the conflicts of interest. And Mark Carney responded with, I'm going to do an internal investigation, which everyone pointed out was completely flawed, that you are going to cover yourself up. You are not going to fully investigate it. And here we are in September. That was back in the spring when the election was going on. Here we are in September, and we still don't have details about this. We have no further information on the conflicts of interest. They want to, push it away and tell you that how Trump is bad, how the trade war is bad, how we're doing our best to take private jet after private jet to talk to companies and talk to countries about expanding our trade partnerships. Meanwhile, this was going on for over a decade, which is why this country is collapsing. and why Mark Carney, again, I'm making this theory, I'm making this assumption. I can't guarantee it being factual or not, but I'm saying that the reason the country is going the direction that it is because we are being acquired by a private equity firm, having someone from Brookfield and the WEF and the globalist sphere acquiring Canada as an asset, selling off its industries to be occupied by Brookfield Asset Management and hollowing out this country for their own personal gains. And you can see it right here. Look at BC-based carbon capture company acquired for $1.48 billion. Who bought it? Brookfield. Hence why they're pushing this insidious agenda. This is the green grift. This is the green slush fund that also hasn't been fully investigated.
BC. This one here saying they're acquiring it for $1.48 billion. I'm not sure how that works, but the numbers seem to fluctuate until they finally complete these deals.
Premiums down. Then I see these voluntary carbon markets and the acceleration of innovation through the marketplace as really coming together and giving us that chance of getting to zero.
Carbon Engineering, Canadian-based energy company focusing on commercializing DAC, direct air capture technology that captures carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. So first off, it's important to note that Occidental, they're not involved with Brookfield. Brookfield doesn't own them. Brookfield doesn't have shares in them, but Mark Carney does. Mark Carney has shares right here. And even though this is his managed account, so he has a money manager who manages this, when he set this up, he could have said, put $100 million, put $10 million, put however many amount of dollars, a percentage in Occidental, in this company, in that company. And then he could have said, spread the rest throughout tech companies and oil and gas and eco-green stuff, whatever.
So he's saying that Brookfield doesn't technically own that asset, but Mark Carney has shares in this. Mark Carney has shares on an oil and gas tycoon that's pushing for the agenda of carbon capture technology. And isn't it just kind of interesting? Isn't it just kind of ironic that he would have shares in a foreign fossil fuel giant corporation that's pushing for carbon capture technology at the same time he is denouncing our own energy sector? At the same time, he's penalizing the province of Alberta and their ability to officially bring us oil and natural gas and energy reserves across the province and across the country. How he's avoiding to build pipelines that could transfer all this energy that is being captured in Alberta to the rest of the country, making it more beneficial, making it easier to transport, and making it more environmentally friendly than transporting oil and gas reserves from foreign nations. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. But this is who Mark Carney is. That Mark Carney is going to deliberately demonize Canada because his assets and his investments, his portfolio, his ties to Brookfield, they all have investments elsewhere outside of Canada. They have no contribution to Canadian society. But they're going to use the opportunity to go after Canada and legislate for this so that they can build upon their own assets and their own investments. That is crazy, folks. That is crazy. And I'm kind of shocked. Again, not putting pressure on the kid, the 23-year-old, but I'm just kind of astonished that you unauthorized the ability to view Mark Carney's personal assets and able to bring this data. Would you not, try to release it to the general public? I'm not saying that you should, but given the state of the factor, given the fact that we have a repeated violator of his own ethics, a repeated violator of conflicts of interest that still have not been resolved, would you not bring that detail to the general public? Would you not bring that to the general spotlight to prove that Mark Carney is not someone to be trusted with? You're already breaking the law. You might as well just take the step further. But it's interesting that all of a sudden now personal data has become a privacy issue, that, oh my God, unauthorized access. Even though for years now, we've been pushing in the direction of you have no personal data, you have no privacy. That, hey, you should put everything into an application. And then that company, in coercion with the government, they get to decide if you have a bank account. They get to decide if you can go out and pay for groceries. They get to decide where you're traveling to, who you get to see, who you're communicating with. That's just all part of the convenience. Rules for me, but not for the, rules for thee, but not for me. That's what I see there.